Hi everyone, my name is Dua and my multimodal project is about bilingual identity in English dominated classrooms. So my research question is, in what ways does bilingualism influence a writer's sense of voice, and how can educators create classrooms that embrace these voices rather than restrict multilingual expression? Many bilingual students, including myself, are taught early on to hide their native languages and speak only English because English is treated as the correct language to talk and write in. So I'm going to start with a personal narrative. I've included a little baby picture of myself in my cultural clothes. And I speak these following languages, but when I was younger, my main mix-up was between English and Urdu because Urdu was my first language. And this personal narrative really centers on moments where I felt like I couldn't speak in Urdu because it was something that had to be hidden because the teachers didn't understand it. So I often felt torn between these languages. जब मैं छोटी थी मुझे समझ नहीं आती थी कि मैं कौन सी भाषा में बोलूँ, क्योंकि जब मैं लिखने लगी थी मुझे उर्दू के लफ्ज़ याद आते थे, और जब मैंने इंग्लिश में बात करनी थी मुझे तब भी उर्दू के लफ्ज़ आते थे. और जो मेरी टीचरें थी वो कहती थी मुझे कि ऐसे नहीं कह सकते क्योंकि हम स्कूल में हैं, हम इंग्लिश में बात करेंगे. What I just said was I often felt conflicted when writing because a lot of times I would be writing in English, but I would keep thinking of words in Urdu because that is just what I knew. And my teachers dismissed it often and were very adamant about the fact that I couldn't write these words. And I don't even think translating was an option because it was never given to me. I was always told that I had to write in English. Doesn't matter if I couldn't think of the word, English only. This isn't just about language, it's also about identity. When students, including myself, are told that home languages aren't what we can speak in or write in, and they're seen as incorrect, it affects confidence and it affects belonging, and it makes you feel like you're different from everyone else. Next, I want to talk about some of the in-class readings that we did, mainly Ansel Dua, Paris, and Young. And these three authors, I feel like, all touched upon the concept of bilingualism. And for me personally, I feel like I connected to Ansel Dua a lot because she shared her experience speaking English and Spanish and how she felt like she didn't belong to any of these and how language shapes her identity. But she felt like she was living in between these two cultures, these two languages, and I felt the same exact way. So I feel like I relate to her a lot. Secondly, there was Young, and he talks about how there's no such thing as one correct English. And when people are told to code switch, they're actually being told to speak or write in a certain way of English, which obviously is not fair, and extremely confusing for young children, including myself. And lastly, Paris argues that schools and teachers should sustain and not erase students' identity when we are told to not speak in our languages, not write in our languages, not think in our languages. It erases a part of ourselves that we usually love very deeply, but it makes it really hard for us to do so. Next, I'll be sharing an infographic on the benefits of bilingualism. So, number one, it causes improved problem-solving skills, attention control, and greater mental flexibility. Since there's so much going on in your head and you're processing all these things at once, it kind of requires you to have this mental flexibility that maybe some people who only speak English may not have. Next, it causes greater empathy, cultural awareness, and it helps you be in the perspective of someone else. You can feel more, you feel for these other people because you have been in those shoes, and you can understand what it's like when you see someone who doesn't know English, who doesn't understand what people are saying, who have an accent. Like, it just makes you more aware because you understand what it's like to be in their shoes. And lastly, it enhances your memory, there's flexibility in learning, and just higher academic performance because when you're taking in information, most of the time your brain is processing it simultaneously in both languages, which is a lot. And this is something that maybe a person who speaks just English or just one language doesn't understand, but since all this is happening at once, it causes you to be just more aware and more your performance is just better, and you just have a lot more going on in your head, but you can use that to your advantage. And oftentimes this is not seen as an advantage, it's seen as something that should be put away, or people are looked at a little dumb. They think they're dumber because they don't really know what's happening, but in fact they are actually processing both things in different languages. So it's a lot more for them, and even though they might seem like they're confused, they're actually not, and they know a lot more than you may think they know. Next, I want to talk about how teachers can better support bilingual students. So starting off, they need to value home languages. Other languages need to be allowed in the classroom and not dismissed. Whether it's classroom discussions, journaling, your free write notebook, reflections should be allowed to be in a different language. And another thing that I think would be really helpful is providing sentence frames, because a lot of times you just don't know where to start, or you can't think of a word in English where you can start. So providing these frames where kids can fill in the blanks is a very easier start and allows a lot more help for these students. Using a lot more visuals and models, something that they can see rather than have to read, because again, that helps them a lot more. And offering multilingual resources, because you want to have, I think having a resource where you can translate is so much, it makes you a lot more confident. I think when I was younger, there was really only texts in Spanish, because obviously that is a predominant language, but oftentimes I wish that I had something that I could translate with in Urdu. So I just wish I did have that. And for grading, I think we should be grading on the actual content, not on the grammar. Feedback should be given privately. You shouldn't be embarrassed. Kids don't want to be called out for misspelling a word or phrasing something wrong. It should happen privately. You should avoid assumptions. You shouldn't just think that, oh, they don't know what they're talking about, because they could very much know what they're talking about but just not know how to put it into words. And lastly, allow multiple modes of demonstrating knowledge. Again, they shouldn't only have to write in certain ways, they should also be able to illustrate or make a video and show what they have to say. As an aspiring teacher, for my last genre, I wanted to include a lesson plan or kind of ideas that I would implement in my own classroom. So these are some inclusive strategies that I would include in a normal everyday lesson. I want to allow students to brainstorm in any language that they want, whether it's drafting a paper, whatever they're doing, do it in your language. I think my main priority would be translate later. Get whatever you have to do done in your language that you're comfortable in the most, and worry about translating it later, because that's a lot easier. And here are two ideas that I kind of have that I would love to do in my classroom. The first one I wanted to do is dual language annotation. So for example, when students are annotating a text or whatever they might be doing, if they can annotate in two different colors, one standing for English and one standing for their native language, this would help them a lot, because when they go back to read this text, they can see their annotations in both languages, and it helps them process it a lot easier. And I know that if it was me, I would love to see both things, because I see them in both languages. I can understand and process it a lot more better, a lot more easier, and less stressful. And I also thought of a free writing kind of exercise, or whatever reflection you might be doing, kind of similar to what I said before. Get it down in your native language first, worry about translating later. Just write, maybe for the first 5 minutes, just write whatever you can think of in your native language, and when it's time to share, you can translate it. When I'm forced to write something in English for a class, for a reflection, I think students will spend a lot of time just making sure that they phrase it correctly, make sure that it's written in a proper English way, and that's not what I want my focus to be. I want them to write all their ideas down and then worry about translating it later. My reflective commentary ties all my genres together and explains why I chose each one. My personal narrative brings emotional resonance and shows the real tension that bilingual students face. My infographic offers evidence and shows why bilingualism is actually a benefit, and it makes it very clear to my audience. And the Urdu that I included in my project brings authenticity and kind of shows what was going on in my head at the time, and shows my linguistic identity that was often suppressed. And finally, this video format allows me to put all these ideas and genres into one multimodal experience, showing how voice and visuals and language all come together to communicate what I had to say. In conclusion, I want to show that bilingualism is a strength and not a limitation, which a lot of people think it is. Bilingual students deserve the freedom that everyone else gets, and they deserve the freedom to bring their own voice into the classroom. And my message isn't to criticize teachers, but to kind of show how they can help better help these students who need help, because a lot of help is necessary for them, and I want them to make their students feel welcome and feel supported and feel like they're okay, and not feel like they have to feel pressured into writing a way that they don't know how to write in. And yeah, thank you for watching.